Hey Rovers, it's our 12th day at sea. We are halfway, maybe a little bit more than halfway to our destination, which is the Port of Horta in the Azores. Now, we are preparing ourselves for some extremely high winds, maybe the highest winds of the passage this evening. We're going to have, I don't know exactly what it is, some sort of cold front pass through or low pressure system that's going to give us over 30 knots, maybe in the 35 knot range for an extended period, about 12 hours. And of course, leading up to it and after that, we'll have high winds as well. So what's our plan? Well, we certainly don't want to be in the Gulf Stream when that happens. So we're going to, we're trying to clear ourselves of the Gulf Stream. And in fact, over the last 24 hours, we've done somewhere in the order of about 120 miles. So that's pretty good sailing for a little boat this size. And we're probably going to clear the Gulf Stream in about maybe 40 miles. And that will give us about 4, maybe 5 hours of buffer zone or time before the winds really descend upon us. Once the winds descend upon us, what happens then? Well, what I'm thinking is I'll sail with them for as long as I can, because the winds they're not going to be contrary to the Gulf Stream. They're in fact going to be the same direction, more or less. So with that, I was thinking I'll sail for as long as I can, but at some point I'm going to turn into the winds and I'm going to heave to, and probably for an extended period, maybe 6 to 10 hours, be hove to and wait for the system to pass and then pick it up again and head on. That's the plan. Now let's enjoy this beautiful sunrise. So currently Wave Rover is on a run, and she's doing a pretty good job, all things considered. The high winds and the seas. The seas actually, they've diminished quite a bit overnight. They're only about, I'd say 1.5 meters to 2 meters at this point. Approximately 6 to 8 feet. So I'll show you the sail and I'll show you the wind vane. So self-steering, as many of you probably know, is particularly difficult, especially when you're on either a broad reach or a run. And what we're on right now is a run, and the Mark III is doing marvelously well. Every now and then when a gust comes along, she will round up a bit, and that's why I have the bungee on the tiller. Now, the other thing that happens is if a big roller comes along and pushes the bow and takes her off course. But in either case, the Mark III brings the boat back. It just takes a few seconds, and when whatever of those two items is finished, the gust or the roller, you know, it takes a few seconds, but she regains course and carries on her merry way. So I brought your attention to the bungee cord, and the reason is, well, if the boat rounds up too far and stalls out, well, this prevents that from happening. And so you only need to put it on the windward side, and you only need to do this on a broad reach or a run. Otherwise, you know, the Mark III just does a marvelous job. Can't say enough about it. Time to go below and make sure that any objects that are loose are put away, and also that I have a nice big hot meal, and you'll never guess what that's going to be. Well, Rovers, it's a little rolly inside here, but it's a little chilly outside. However, I have to say, it's an absolutely lovely, lovely day. With this sunshine, I'm able to dry out the inside of the boat. But I'm also preparing my daily meal. And for those of you who've been watching for a while, you know that that consists of Wave Rover seafood omelet. But what's in the omelet? That's the question. So today, on account of the heavy weather that we're expecting in about 20 hours, and I'll talk about that in a minute, on account of that, I am having an extra big meal because I'm not sure if I'll be able to cook one tomorrow or not, depending on the circumstances. So today's seafood omelet consists of 3 eggs, 2 tins of sardines, 1 tin of mackerel, and 1 tin of salmon, and a tablespoon and a half of grass-fed beef tallow. So it's extra big. And as far as the weather goes, well, there's a front approaching and it has 40-knot winds. But we're racing it. If we can just stay ahead of it, it'll dissipate before it gets to us. But if we don't make haste, it will catch us and we'll have those 40-knot winds. So the plan is I'm using the Gulf Stream right now to get the extra miles and to get east. And I'm looking at about, in 20 hours, I'm looking at about 24 to 28 knots, gusting over 30. So that's the heavy winds I'll be looking at. But if I don't get about 120 miles today, I'll be looking more at the 40-knot winds. So I have a lot of incentive to make a lot of miles today. I also have to make an additional 100 miles after that to get out of the wrath of this cold front. And I think we'll be able to do that because we'll have the Gulf Stream and the wind running in the same direction. It's a strong wind, yes, and I'll be reefed right down, but we're going to try running with it. Now, let's get back to this meal. So there we go, the seafood omelet. Bon appetit. Well, it's been an hour since we were last on deck. Come on up, let's take a look. Well, the wind has dropped off quite a bit, so we've got our full working sail up. We're making about 3 to 4 knots, and that's not ideal. I mean, it's comfortable. You could do this all day long. This is really nice, but we've got somewhere to be. We're trying to get ahead of this weather system, so we need to be averaging 4.5 knots. So I need this wind to fill in a bit and maybe change direction just a little bit, but we can work around a lot of those variables. I still have a lot of time, and the thing about this area that I've noticed is if you want a change in wind, just wait an hour, because it is constantly changing and it's not always following the forecast. So, you know, as good as the forecasts are, do take them with a pinch of salt. Well, Rovers, I am continuing to enjoy some of the best sailing so far. This is terrific. There's 2 things I want to talk about. First is the electrical system. For those of you who are watching last week's video, you would have remembered that we're not charging the batteries, and it just stopped one day. And so I've been using, I don't have any meter on board, so to make a long story end, I jumped the surge protection to see if we could get power directly from the solar directly to the battery, and no joy. So then I tried going directly from the panels to my Bluetti power station. Again, no joy. So out of that, I've determined that the problem is with the solar array, and there's probably a loose connection somewhere up there, but I don't have tools, and it would be worthless to try to pull those apart, especially given that most of the connections are right above the Mark III, which is vital to my progress. So what does that mean? Well, we still have approximately 2 weeks to go. I've determined that I'm using about 2% of my battery capacity a day, and that's on the basics. That's on my AIS, my inReach communicator, and my tablet that I do navionics on. So those three items are consuming about 2% of my battery capacity. So based on 2 weeks, I should be able to get to Horta. Now, bear this in mind, that does not include nav lights, which when I get near Horta and vessel traffic increases, I will have to turn on nav lights, probably the last couple of nights. And it doesn't include VHF, but I do have a handheld VHF. There is one more bright spot, and that is the Bluetti power bank was always brought on board as an emergency backup, and it will be used to charge either the inReach communicator or the cameras or the tablet with the navionics. And that means really just the battery. The ship's power will be used for just AIS and potentially nav lights. Well, this is the Bluetti B80. This was my emergency backup, and I honestly didn't think I'd use it at all, but I'm sure glad I brought it along, because this is what's used right now to charge the inReach communicator, which is like a satellite communicator. I can send text messages of 160 characters, and it's how I stay in touch with Mrs. Rover, but also how I stay in touch with Seahawk, my meteorologist. I also charge my tablet, and the tablet is where I keep my navionics, and right now I'm currently charging the battery pack for this camera. So the reason we're using this, if it's not clear, is a few episodes ago I mentioned how we don't have the ability to charge our main batteries, and I can't find the fault. It'll be addressed when we get to Horta, but in the meantime I have to use this battery for this setup, and then the ship's battery right here, that's being used pretty much exclusively for the AIS, and when we get close to Horta I'll use it for the nav lights. Coincidentally, I'll be charging through this port right here. I'll be charging my handheld VHF. Right now it has a full charge, and I can use that for communication if I see another vessel that's closing too close on AIS. So the second issue concerns making the boat ready for the strong winds that we're expecting tonight. So the winds are expected to start noticeably getting stronger at 0200. Of course, it's always been my experience that anything like strong winds or emergencies always seem to happen sometime after midnight. So the boat is ready in all respects. It only took about 2 or 3 minutes just to tidy up some of the stuff I had on the shelves that could potentially be projectiles. It was camera related material or stuff, so yeah, it took very little time. So the winds will be at 0-200 will be about 23 knots, gusting 30. It's those gusts that we worry about. And the farther east I make it, the less those winds are. So I have, you know, strong encouragement to keep the sails up and to keep going and make as much east as possible before and during some of those initial higher winds. At a certain point, you know, I have to make a decision. Do I fully reef and then just hove to and wait it out, or you know, I'll assess my options at the time. So let's just go below. Well, Wave Rabbit says he wants to stay out and he wants to look after the lucky coin. Not that he's superstitious, he said. And the rest of the shelves are clear. As you already saw, the electronics are charging. The pot that was on the stove has been tucked away into the footwell of the bunk. And this is my favorite light. It goes, you know, it's a headlamp, and it's fully charged and it's standing by. And then we just have the rest of the bunk. Up forward, everything has been tied down, but I mean, it's not a big deal up forward. The everything's soft up there anyway. And back aft, again, it's just small stuff, very light stuff, so it really doesn't matter if it picks up. Wet weather gear standing by. And finally, I believe my shorts are dry. I switched up my first 20-liter container of water today, so today I believe is day 12, so you can do the math on that. So we're into our second 20-liter container, and on the stove I topped up the alcohol on the stove since it was so calm, and I only used half a liter to top up the alcohol. So I've been cooking pretty much every day and only used half a liter of alcohol. Look at that beautiful sunset. There's Wave Rover under full working sail. So currently we're making about 5 knots. We're just at sunset, as you just saw, and we have lovely conditions. In fact, this has been just a great day of sailing. So we know that tonight, now the latest forecast puts it at 0300, that I'll be getting the winds in the mid-20s gusting to over 30. And those conditions will continue for about 18 to 24 hours. So I'll be battening the hatch shortly and going below. The beauty of the junk rig is it is so easy to reef that when I feel that wind coming up, I'll be able to drop a panel. An hour later, drop another panel and continue on until we're in our fully reefed mode, which is a point that I intend to be in before 0300. So it'll be a night of reefing, but like I said, unlike my previous boat, the Contessa, reefing on this takes mere seconds. So it'll be done when I need to do it. So right now we're enjoying the 5+ knots that we're getting. Even though it doesn't look like it from the wind, we are, but it's on account of the Gulf Stream. I will give you an update in the morning when the sun comes up and let you know how our plan is panning out. But just so you know, if we were to stop and heave to at the first sign of high wind, we would be hammered with 40 knots. Now we know that, and that's the reason our plan is to keep pushing through with those high winds, you know, using our seamanship to keep going and you know, not be forced to hove to. But that is plan B. Plan B is to hove to. on that note, like I said, I'll give you an update in the morning. Well, it's sunrise. Let's go up and see what's happening. Well, I just checked the wind. It's blowing 21, which isn't as strong as it was last night, but I'm happy with that. It's supposed to build during the day again, and we'll deal with that when it happens. So right now, we're steering east. The wind is from the southwest, and the current is setting mostly to the east. Now, even though we're steering east, we're actually making more of an east-northeast. So yeah, correction, I guess the current is east-northeast, setting 2. So the seas are about 2 to 3 meters. Again, last night when it was blowing harder, the seas were actually lower because they hadn't had a chance to build up. We're in deep water, and the wind is blowing basically in the direction of the current, so we're not getting those short, sharp seas that were confused like we got last time. These are far more manageable. They're spaced out so far, and you know, nowhere near as big. So we're just going to stay the course right now, and just wait this out. Well, another beautiful sunrise at sea. The last 48 hours, well, it's been a challenge, that's for sure, but it's been a good challenge. We had seas that were somewhere between 4 to 5 meters. We had winds in excess of 35 knots. But through it all, Wave Rover was a champ. She more or less accomplished 100 miles a day. I mean, that's phenomenal for a 21-foot boat under really good conditions, but under these storm-like conditions, well, that's practically unheard of. So she's proven herself to be a pretty good blue water cruiser. Not that she had to prove herself to me, but I think there were some doubters out there. This should dispel any doubts. Now, the plan for today. As you can see, I've got my full working sail up, and we're trying to make more miles because when a system like this goes through, it generally leaves a vacuum of some sort where it takes a day or so for the wind to fill in again after it exits. So we're trying to get ahead of that. We're trying to get to the other side where the wind is still blowing so that we don't lose that day. It's going to be a long shot, but we're up for it. Anyway, Rovers, as always, thanks for watching, and forge your own adventure.